A practical view of the prevailing religious system of professed Christians in the higher and middle classes in this country, contrasted with real Christianity, by William Wilberforce. Introduction. When Mr. Cadell, the publisher, was consulted about Mr. Wilberforce's new book, he shook his head. There was little demand for religious literature, but if Mr. Wilberforce was prepared to put his name on the title page, he thought he might risk printing 500 copies. In fact, these disappeared in a few days, and 5 editions were called for in as many months, containing in all some 75,000 copies. That was in 1797. By 1837, 15 editions had appeared, each running into thousands. In America, there have been 25 editions, and the book has been translated into German, Italian, Spanish, and Dutch. Wilberforce was 37 when he issued what he called his manifesto. Some of his friends in London society remembered him as he had been a few years before, a wealthy man about town, always in demand for dances and dinners and card parties, full of fun and mimicry, and with an attractive singing voice. The book reflected the remarkable change that had come over him during the previous 10 years. It had begun when a friend persuaded him to read Doddridge's Rise and Progress of Religion, which made a profound impression on the frivolous young man. He took to studying the New Testament in Greek. A spiritual upheaval began to take place, and Wilberforce passed through many months of misery, impenitence, and depression. From this he emerged with the help of John Newton, and became again his old happy self, but with a difference. To the dismay of his friends, he had lost interest in his former pursuits. More serious still, he had lost his taste for politics. For his brilliant gifts as a debater had made him a marked man in the House of Commons, and with the intimate friendship of Pitt, a great political career lay ahead. Only the personal persuasions of the Prime Minister induced him to return to parliamentary life at all, on the ground that it was surely part of a Christian's duty to be concerned in public questions. But it was not until Wilberforce was persuaded to become the mouthpiece of the young anti-slavery movement that he really came to life again and found a cause to which he could wholeheartedly devote himself. The story of that long, heroic campaign cannot, of course, be told again here. Others had a great share in it, but by common consent, the main credit for the abolition of the slave trade belongs to William Wilberforce. But it was his deep, consuming religious faith that inspired him and sustained him through its tedium and its labours and its perils. Many modern readers of a practical view will feel, as did many who read it at first, that the author takes religion too seriously, and that such intensity and strictness are unnatural and unattractive. But no one, except himself, ever charged Wilberforce with not living up to its stern standards. Yet he was no self-righteous prig, and certainly enjoyed life. He stood by his principles without offending others. Even the Prince Regent curbed his loose language when Wilberforce was in the company. Wilberforce strove to win his friends to a like faith, and tried deliberately to turn the conversation to religious topics. But he never ceased to be a welcome and well-loved figure wherever he went, except among the defenders of the slave trade. Society regarded him with a genuine and friendly respect. In public life, his unselfish service of all good causes, carried out with modesty and personal charm, won him an immense influence. By the end of his life, there was no more universally honoured British name in the world than his. Little known as it is today, this book was one of his great achievements and spoke with power to many thousands for 100 years. The long explanatory title, characteristic of 18th century writings, explains that the book is no theoretical defence of Christian doctrine. In his introduction, Wilberforce stated his main object as being not to convince the sceptic or to answer the arguments of persons who avowedly oppose the fundamental doctrines of our religion, but to point out the scanty and erroneous system of the bulk of those who belong to the class of orthodox Christians, and to contrast their defective scheme with a representation of what the author apprehends to be real Christianity. Often it has filled him with deep concern to observe in this description of persons scarcely any distinct knowledge of the real nature and principles of the religion which they profess. The subject is of infinite importance. Let it not be driven out of our minds by the bustle or dissipations of life. This present scene, with all its cares and all its gaieties, will soon be rolled away, and we must stand before the judgment seat of Christ. This awful consideration will prompt the writer to express himself with greater freedom than he should otherwise be disposed to use. He trusts that this consideration, while it justifies his frankness, will secure to him a serious and patient perusal. For this edition, it has been necessary to reduce considerably the bulk of a book which fills 450 pages of small type, but I am confident that its central message is faithfully retained. To those who wish to read the story of the life of this great man, I cordially commend Wilberforce, a Narrative, by Reginald Coupland, Oxford University Press, 1923. Hugh Martin.